Hey, you guys, welcome back to Money with Mission podcast. Remember, I told you we have Dr. Julie Rehfeldt on today. Julie is a physician who has left medicine because she started investing in real estate. And we're going to hear that story, and it's fun. I like it. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Hi, thank you.
Good to see you. We've been talking quite a bit. We met back in 2018, we believe, 17, 18, on a investor summit at sea cruise. And we didn't talk anymore. We met there and then didn't talk anymore until Julie sent me I got an email from her about her equity company, her real estate investing company. It's like, Julie, what are you doing? Now here we are talking about this. It's really good to see you.
It's nice to see you too. I was really excited.
So we've been talking, and so I ask everybody this when we first start is how did you learn about money? Where did you get your ideas about how to make money and what money was for and that kind of thing?
My mom was a teacher, so money was tight when I was little, but my grandmother was in the second mortgage business.
Okay.
So her mantra that I still remember is we were put on this earth to earn interest, not to pay interest.
Okay.
So
A good
because of
mantra.
that, I was always interested in money, just money in general. We're talking even coins.
Okay.
I just was always interested when I was growing up. My family was invested in real estate, but I wasn't really, that was just something in the background and I didn't even think about it as something that you could invest in. And my goal was always to be a doctor. So
o-
money was there, but I wanted to be a doctor. It didn't really matter. Money didn't matter. It was just like, I'm going to be a doctor and I assume that'll pay the bills. And if I get through medical school and don't like it, well, I got a degree in chemistry. So I calculated actually how I could still pay off my medical school loans, even if I had a degree in chemistry and work.
Okay. So you actually thought about that you might not like medicine. It's like I went into it thinking this is my thing. I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life. And this is like, and it was like after 5 years, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? You thought about it before. It's like, okay, if I don't like it, this is how I can function. That's pretty cool. So you did the whole medical school residency, all that, and then you liked medicine for a long time, or talk about that?
Going to medical school, I found out that I loved studying everything about the human body. Everything. Every class was awesome. I had straight A's in my first 2 years just
Okay.
because every class was awesome. I shouldn't, okay, I had a B. I had a B in behavioral health, but everything else was awesome. And I loved studying it. Anatomy, I looked at the body, I could remember everything. And a friend and I studied together. She would study the physiology, I'd study the anatomy, and she would teach me. And then I ended up in an anatomy tutor or a TA after that. But
Okay.
and I went on to do my clinical rotations in California, in Bakersfield, actually, which is
Okay.
nothing to do in Bakersfield but go to the hospital, just as that type of town. So loved everything about it. I got to remove a tumor from a brain with the neurosurgeon. I actually got to
Wow.
scoop it out. That was so cool. I love surgery. My final decision when I was heading on to residency is do I become a surgeon or do I go into internal medicine? And I love the discourse about internal medicine. And surgeons do this too, as you sit and talk about every single case and you talk about all the medicine surrounding it. And I love that part of it. And the surgeons at the hospital I was at, finally, every surgeon had blown up during surgery. They had freaked out, something had gone wrong. And every surgeon they just weren't, I didn't like them during surgery. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I liked them outside of surgery, but not in surgery. And there was one left that I liked. I was actually on my anesthesia rotation and a resident nicked the liver and he freaked out. And then I was done with wanting to be a surgeon.
No surgery.
Like,
Okay.
and it's not that I didn't like doing the procedures. I drove the camera on 8 laparotomies during medical school. I got to do a lot during medical school. So anyhow, I finally decided that day when he blew up that I was going into internal medicine. I signed up. I got into a residency program actually in Michigan, which is how I ended
Okay.
up in Michigan, and pretty much loved everything about it. But I did realize that after I was in the intensive care unit, when taking care of patients, I needed a little bit of calming and I needed a little bit of TLC and would go out and get drunk with my friends and then come back.
Okay.
And then
All
that's the only
right.
time I drink. I don't
Do
drink.
you
Right? then
do
I
you do
that
what kind of things we would do when we're trying to
It was just too stressful. And I always thought that we shouldn't be taking care of these 70, 80-year olds with intubation. I
Uh-huh.
just never thought that was the right thing to do on these people that had end stage diseases. And so I ended up doing an oncology rotation and found out that it's okay if people die. I really saw that it was like that's part of life. And it was a beautiful thing in some respects. And we had helped a young patient actually die on New Year's Eve. And I was with the family. I cried with the family, held hands with them, and walked out of the hospital in the best mood I had been in probably all of residency.
Mm.
Then I decided to go into palliative care. Uh,
Okay.
and palliative care wasn't a thing at the time. I thought I had to go into oncology to do hospice care. And
Okay.
I did a rotation and someone enlightened me. And I ended up doing my fellowship at Stanford in palliative.
Okay. In palliative care. Okay.
Yeah, palliative care and hospice. So that's what I went in to do. And when I moved back to Michigan after I got married, or went just before I got married, I ended up getting recruited at the Battle Creek VA in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Okay.
And I was the medical director of their nursing home, the hospice physician, and I worked on the dementia ward.
Okay.
I didn't realize how much dementia dealt with palliative care, and it was like the best thing. It was like my little palliative care environment. It was my place, and
You
I
loved it.
loved
Okay.
everything about it. I loved being a doctor. I loved being in the dementia unit. I loved everything. And
So
then
you're how far into medicine how far into your own practice are you at this point at the VA?
at the
Were
VA, I spent 20 years at the VA.
so you were there and you were still loving it. You weren't thinking about doing anything else but medicine at this point.
Correct.
I'm doing this, doing this. When did that change? When did you start thinking I got to figure this out?
A little bit happened when I became chief of medicine. After becoming chief of medicine, I decided I got elevated to the level that I was very competent at, but didn't like. I didn't like being chief of medicine. It was taking too much time. I had 2 kids at home. I couldn't be the chief of medicine and have 2
Yeah.
young kids at home. It just wasn't working.
How long did it take for you to figure out that that wasn't for you?
That took me probably a year,
Okay.
maybe 6 months to a year.
Okay.
That really wasn't for me. And then after I asked my chief of staff to step down from being chief of medicine, he asked me to stay till October, and this was April. So I stayed 6 more months.
Okay.
And in those 6 months, it solidified that I needed to step down.
Okay.
It was definitely the right decision. And it was the hardest decision I've ever made. I felt like I was disappointing everybody,
Yep.
including myself.
Yep. I was there.
I,
I did the
I,
same thing as chief of urology. It's like, this does not work for me. My life is terrible and I can't do this
yeah,
anymore. But I never quit. I don't quit anything.
no,
You should and it took
never.
another woman talking to me, it's like, "No, it's not quitting, it's doing what's right for you." I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay."
Well, I had to then as chief of medicine, you have meetings with your staff. And I had to sit down with my staff and tell them I was quitting.
Mhm. Mm,
Hardest thing I've ever done.
yeah.
And they didn't want me to quit. So
Yeah.
then I was good at it.
Yeah, I
It wasn't that I wasn't good. It's just that it was tearing apart my life.
yeah,
Finally. And at home, I'm not sure that everybody here at home thought I was doing a great job because I wasn't able to spend as much time with them as I would have had I not been chief.
in the
So,
mood in the way that you would want to, even if you're spending time with them, you're tired, you got something else
yeah,
happening, somebody's calling you about something and you can't be
always.
present and yeah.
Exactly. So that started my thinking of that maybe things weren't right. And so then a few fast forward about 3 years, that was 2013, 2012. Fast forward to 2016, my mom passed away. So anyhow, she passed away. I was having a rough time for about a year. And at a year, I decided that my kids were more important
Mhm.
than the job. And I decided I was going to retire early,
Okay.
but I had no idea how to do that because I was looking at my 401k and going, we can't live off that for 10 years. Even though I had put the maximum in for 20 years. It's not like I didn't contribute.
So at this
Uh,
point, you were in the VA for 20 years.
I was in the VA for 20 years.
If you took regular retirement at that point, whatever, I don't even know what the retirement age well, how much longer would you have had to stay there to take regular retirement, government aid retirement?
It would have been 60 because of when I started and how old
So
I was.
so how many more years did you have to have?
To get to 60, I needed 8 more years.
Okay. So here you are knowing that you don't need to do this anymore. You want to spend more time with your kids. The death, the passing of your mother made you realize that this isn't the right life. This isn't how I want to be spending my time. These kids are much more important to me than as much as I love palliative care, as much as you loved all that stuff, this is where I need to be. And you started getting into that, I need to do something different. Because if you had just counted on your 401k and stayed in there for 8 more years, who the heck knows what could have happened
Yeah.
and how much
I
more you
can't
could,
imagine.
because we've talked a little bit about how our minds go and
Yeah.
how the burnout that comes with hanging into something that you know is not your fit.
Yeah. And it was interesting at that point because I had to learn how to do that. I listened to tons of podcasts, all these people telling me, save everything, you can retire now. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to live that way.
Yeah.
And then I heard someone on a podcast that he started talking about living with life with abundance.
Okay.
You can retire with abundance. And I went, how do I do that? How do I do that? And he actually had a podcast and I started listening. And his idol was Robert Kiyosaki,
Okay.
Shad Poor.
Yeah.
My idol was him.
Was
So
this man, this person, okay, this
yeah,
man,
this
uh-huh.
person. And so eventually I did read Rich Dad Poor Dad, but that wasn't my start in this journey. And he talking about retiring with abundance and how you can do that. I started figuring it out. And my mom had left me a little bit of a few properties in California that I
Okay.
was able to use to invest with, but I didn't know how.
Right.
I did get them to the point of cash flowing. I knew how to do that because it wasn't very hard to charge more rent and make sure that there's more money coming in than going out.
So I'm gonna have a timeout because everybody gets told that they can't cash flow in California. How were you cash flowing properties that you were renting out in California?
These properties were bought in 1987 and
Okay.
the other property was bought in 2001. And in 2001, that property, I was able, even with the taxes are crazy, with on top of what the mortgage was, we fortunately had a low mortgage on it. We only had a couple 400,000, or actually less than that. We had about 300,000 total in a mortgage.
Okay.
Because of that, I was able to charge enough rent to pay the mortgage, to pay the taxes. And each year I would go up. I didn't go up very much, actually. He was getting pretty much rent controlled, but I'd go up maybe $25, $50 a year.
Okay.
And in doing that, my goal was to make 200 a month on the property. So I
Okay.
was cash flowing by 200. So it paid the bill. I mean, as long as the bills were paid, I didn't need to overcharge him. I just didn't because I was working on appreciation.
Okay.
The other property did not cash flow. And actually, I did have to raise the rent quite a bit on that one to get
Okay.
it to the point of cash flow. And the third property was not rented. It was where my mom had lived. And I
Okay.
ended up renting that. That did not cash flow. I actually paid for that with other investments.
Okay.
So
So you inherited properties. Your mom had bought properties. She had said she had lived in them. Then she would move to something else and rent that one out. So she just didn't sell her stuff. She just would, and that's how she accumulated. And then that's how
yeah.
you accumulated. And she started in the early 2000s doing it. So in California, things do appreciate, and you happen to get them at an uptime. What did you learn about using those properties besides raising the rent? What did you learn about using those properties to help you advance your real estate investing?
So through following the podcast, and I met someone who could mentor me in how to creative finance and how to
Okay.
change the financing. And I learned about getting a HELOC and I learned
Okay.
about how I could. And so what I started to do is I started to use the equity that we had in those homes. I got a HELOC that would get me to about 75% equity on it. Of course, I didn't have much on it yet. And then what I did is I used that equity to everything that I bought with that equity would cash flow to pay off the
The
increased
loan.
loan.
Okay.
But I knew that California wasn't at that point, California wasn't a place that I could use that equity to buy a property.
Okay.
It was too expensive already. So what I did is I bought properties in Pennsylvania, Alabama, Missouri,
And
and
you were living in Michigan?
I live in Michigan.
How did you buy properties in Pennsylvania? How did you buy properties in all those other places?
I met a through the mentor that I got that taught me how to strip the equity and use the equity to do this, he actually hooked me up with a turnkey property company out of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay.
And they would investigate the different markets. And those markets, they would have sellers that would sell the properties. And then they had contacts with an insurance, property management, and a lender. And I used their contacts to purchase these properties because I was still working full
Yeah,
time, probably putting in about 50 to 60 hours a week.
I got it. Okay. So first you got a mentor who was helping you learn how to use what you have to get more.
Yes,
Then your mentor, who you had, it connected you with someone who could help you do the things that he or she was teaching you how to do. So
exactly.
through your networking, so what I'm getting at, you guys, is that so many of us think we have to do it by ourselves. We listen to every podcast we can listen to. We go to a meeting or we just read books and think, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. It's so much faster. Let's say you didn't have that mentor. How long you would have figured it out? We're smart. I mean, we're doctors. We could figure
Yeah,
stuff
I
out.
would have figured out
You
eventually.
figure it out. How much longer would you think it would have taken you to figure it out? Can you even guess?
I'd probably still be working as a doctor, but it probably would have taken me another 2 to 3 years. Ultimately, I would have eventually found a different mentor that
Yeah.
would have told me how to do it.
Somebody so you realized you needed somebody to help
Oh, yeah.
you, and I think many of us do not. As physicians, we are used to doing it by ourselves, and so we figure out we gotta know everything on our own before we can do anything.
We need to think about it as residency. We had attendings. Become a
Yes.
resident again.
Perfect, perfect. So you didn't run around to all these different cities and states and figure out which properties to buy. You had somebody who was doing that for you. You
Yeah.
understood what they were doing and why they were picking these places, and then you would buy it through them with all the connections they had that helped you run them.
They would give me a pro forma and I still ran the numbers myself. I
Okay.
for all the numbers. Their pro formas weren't perfect. They didn't include the mortgage. I had to make sure that I could cover it even after. But yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Okay. All right. And I'm so like, I want to make sure people understand you took loans out on properties you owned that had equity, and the things you invested in covered that loan that you took plus cash flowed into your pocket.
Yes.
Listen, you guys, this beautiful stuff. And Julie's just a doctor. Come on. So, what was your fear? So, everybody thinks that nobody's afraid when they start doing this investing. And oh my gosh, I'm afraid. We talked about this. Well, I'm afraid still when I go inside. I get scared and nervous and worked up when I'm going and signing loan docs on properties. And how many have you signed? So many. Well, we still get worked up when you do it. Writing a
Absolutely.
check. Oh, or wiring money more often now. Do we wire it? It's like, how much money do I gotta
Okay. I had never wired money until it started. So I was afraid that I was going to send it to the wrong place and it was going to end up gone.
Yep.
So that was scary. I'd never written checks this big because the biggest check I'd written was 2,500 for my mortgage. That was the biggest. I writing a check that's even $10,000 for a property was just crazy. None of them cost that, but you know, that
Yeah.
that was scary. And then I was also taking some of the equity and investing in syndications, and that's giving your money to someone else and letting someone else that you trust make
Run a
make the
deal.
investment. And so that was scary, and those were large checks.
How did you meet these people that you could trust enough to give them large checks?
I met them through one of my mentors that actually the gentleman that I had listened to for now it's 7 years. We're
Okay.
still in his network.
Okay.
Uh, so
Julie, have you paid a mentor? Have you paid a coach? Have you paid people to help you do this?
I was listening to the podcast and the initial when I was trying to figure out how to strip the equity, I did pay $5,000 to learn how to do that.
Okay.
Initially, and he went through my entire finances and helped me shore up everything that I needed to shore up, which I didn't have to shore up too much because we weren't doing my husband and I were making more than we were spending by quite a
Okay.
bit at the time. We have young kids, not old kids. It changes as the kids get older. But so in doing that, I did pay him $5,000, but that at that time for a mentor, no, I didn't pay anything. Now I've paid mentors, but that's for a different purpose.
Okay. So you were lucky you found mentors who would mentor you for relatively low amounts of money who actually knew what they were doing.
Yes.
Because sometimes you get those folks who are gonna talk to you and you don't have to pay them, and then you gotta really vet those folks. Vet who's teaching you, so you know that they've actually done what they're teaching you how to do. Because sometimes you get out there and they teach you what they read in a book, and they've never done what they're talking about.
Yeah. I only worked with people that I knew were actually doing it. And it was the mentor that I got happened to be the king of how many streams of income can I create?
Okay.
And so that's really what I was learning how to do is create streams of income.
Nice, nice. Do you remember, and I know you remember some of them, the advantages of using the borrowed money from your properties as opposed to using money that you were making in your business, in your regular work, your W-2 income from the VA?
There was a big choice that I was making when I started this. And the choice was the money that I was using to invest with, I wanted to keep completely separate from our home finances.
Okay,
So because of that, in the home finances, I have used a little bit, but not much. And I told my husband, I am going to start doing this investing, and I want to retire early. And his main goal was you need to replace your salary before you retire.
okay.
That was his. So if you replace your salary, I don't have any problem with you
We'll do
retiring.
whatever you wanna do.
Do
Okay.
whatever you want to do. And so there was no interference whatsoever for me to do this stuff. So anyhow, so I started investing. My paycheck went into our joint account.
Okay,
That went to home, vacations, everything that we needed, cars, whatever we needed for that home lifestyle. The investment account was totally separate. And because of that, that's why I used the equity from the investment account to invest and to increase the equity in my investments
gotcha.
because my husband and I were very clear that that would be my investment. And the other side is we were still putting money into 401ks. We were still everything that we didn't change anything from our home and our money coming in. The only thing we changed is if I made a little extra money on the investments, maybe we take a little bigger vacation and I would have,
Okay,
and that was grandma paid for the vacation.
okay. Okay. This is really good. So now you've got your own single family houses that you were buying through the company. You've got all those in all various states. You're also investing in syndication. So meet an operator. They talk you through the deal. You understand the deal. You put your money in. Has everything gone well?
No, I do want to say that one thing, it's not only from the turnkey provider, it's not only single family homes. I also have a triplex and one of the homes in California I sold and we did a 1031 exchange into an apartment building in Missouri. So I own
Okay.
an apartment building as well.
Okay.
And that's the difference of cash flowing. And I went from cash flowing not actually minus 2,500 a month because I
Getting the
switched
thing
all
in.
the equity. So it was, I count that one property. I was minus 2,500 a month to making 5,000 a month. Yeah, it was a win. So
Yes.
there's some great wins in there. Now it's not quite cash flowing that well, but that's because of a lot of factors, but it's going to get better this next year.
Yeah, and we
So
ride the waves.
yeah, we're
Everything's
riding
not
the wave.
always good. It's not always perfect, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because
And
going from
so
negative 2,500 to 5,000 sounds pretty perfect.
it was
Um,
pretty perfect initially, yeah, it was doing great. So and that property pays for itself. I never have to inject money. Actually, I sometimes use the money for other things, so
mhm, mhm,
that one's still doing well.
yes,
So a couple of the other properties, one of the things that did happen with some of the turnkey properties that I bought that didn't go well, and I'll tell you about the syndications in a second, but a couple of the single family homes I bought in a market that were very C-class market.
mhm,
And it was in a market where people don't care about other people's property. And
okay,
so I had issues where the tenants would move out and there's $20,000 worth of damage to the inside that has to
mm,
be repaired before you can rent it again. And
right,
you're making 1,000 a month. So obviously you're not going to do well.
yeah,
It did end up, and it was happened to be in Pennsylvania. And I did end up selling. I had 5 properties. I bought them fairly cheap. So I was able to actually make a little bit of money coming out of them, but I sold all of them because
yeah,
it was painful. Because
the
it seemed like every single week I was fixing something or renovating. And
mhm,
part of it was also the properties were built in 1900s.
okay,
So then you also run into piping problems and you run into all kinds of problems. I also had a house in Georgia. Someone had moved out. We just finished the turn. We were about to get pictures to invite people in, and someone came in and stole all the copper
we
in
had that
the
too,
house,
mhm,
leaving the water on. They couldn't turn the water off and take all the copper. No, they left the water on. But that was just like I just thought of that as just that's just part of doing business. Stuff happens, and then you move
and
on.
And
And
that
so
is one of the things I had a podcast guest on recently who talked about managing loss and realizing that you will lose when
mhm,
in anything you invest in, especially when we're working to control it ourselves, things are not going to go well all the time. You will lose and you have to be ready to manage that emotion and manage that whole thing. And it's not that like we lost 18 properties in 2008. It's not it wasn't about the real estate. It's not about the real estate. It's about, okay, where did I screw that up? For me and for you, it's like, oh, when am I going to cut my losses here and get out of here? You're not hanging in there trying to keep a thing going that's just not
the
going to
funny
go.
thing is I didn't cut my loss. The insurance covered it, and I still
Georgia
own the
house. I was talking about the Pennsylvania ones.
and one there, I still own the property that they sold the copper out of. I'm selling it.
The Georgia one. Yes. Okay.
That's in Alabama, but it just says there's been things that have happened. The things that have happened that have been more painful actually is in the past 2 years when the interest rates shot up. I'm in part owner in probably 20 syndications,
Okay.
and
Owning apartment buildings, apartment complexes.
most of them are apartment buildings. One's a frame tech business,
Okay.
but most of them are apartment buildings.
Okay.
And in those, a few of them didn't have the cash on hand for when the rate cap shot up
Right.
30,000 a year to 1,000,000 a year.
Mm,
And so there have been a few of those syndications that we had to sell because we could not, even with a capital call, could not recover
okay.
on some of those. And because of that, we had to sell it for what the loan was, which meant that we lost all the equity. So those have been a little bit challenging. And that's been, well, fortunately it's not all in my investment, but had it been all in my investment, that would have been devastating.
When those things were going on, when you had the interest rates went up, the cost of interest went up, and you had a capital call, what kind of conversation was had between you and the operator and the group to so you understood what was happening?
Unfortunately, it wasn't soon enough because they had more problems going on. They waited a few months.
Okay.
And that was something that I will never do. You need to talk to your investors now. You don't
Yes.
need a couple of months to say we're having problems. You should be on top of that. And I think that part of the problem is they had grown very quickly and they weren't on top of it,
Uh-huh.
which was
Okay.
part of the problem.
Okay.
Had they been on top of it, I don't think the conversation is the rate cap shot up and the cash is not available based on our model to pay that rate cap, even though we're still getting a lot of rent because the properties are still functioning,
Right.
covering that rate cap when you're making, let's say you're making 2 million a year in net operating income. The loan, you're trying to get a rate cap and they're charging you $1 million for that rate cap. But on top of that, you've hit where that cap is with interest because maybe you had it at 3%. Now it's 5% interest because that's what the rate cap was. So now
Mhm.
you have to pay that differential in interest.
Right.
And on top of that, then you have the rate cap. And then also in those 2 years, insurance double and taxes will double in a
Mm.
lot of places.
Mhm. Mhm.
And until you can fix those tax problems, which eventually some of those have been renegotiated with the cities, but not all of them have. But all those together killed deals.
Yeah.
It just killed deals. So if you didn't have fixed rate debt and when those interest rates shot up, your whole project's going to struggle.
Yeah.
And so
So questions to ask when you're looking at syndications now, when
Mhm.
you're looking to invest in a syndication, what kind of questions are you asking to be able to understand the risks of the kind of things that happened to you before, that you decrease the risk of those things happening again?
A big thing right now, because of, yes, the interest rates are not as high as they were in the 1980s. Okay. Interest rates are actually at about their average for if you go back a whole
Yeah.
set of years. So the big thing is getting variable rate debt, though. Things are not certain in the economy right now.
Correct.
We're coming off of a president and coming off of COVID and going to a new president and a whole new administration, things are not stable. So fixed rate debt, if you make sure that they have underwrote the deal for fixed rate debt,
Mhm.
because
And that's what they're gonna get,
and
and
that's
that's the
yeah,
loan you're gonna get. Don't underwrite it at fixed rate and then get variable rate, and then
exactly.
it don't work.
So that's the biggest thing. The other thing is make sure, ask the questions about the insurance. Have they shopped the insurance well? What does the insurance cover in the area? Are you getting flood insurance? If
Mhm.
you're in a flood zone, you have to have that. Are
Yeah.
they getting wind insurance or hurricane insurance? You can't even get hurricane insurance. They charge 10%. Your deductible goes from, like, let's say it's 2,000 on a house. It goes up to 10% of whatever damage is done with hurricane insurance. So these are things that you need to know. What are going to be the expensive if something tragic happens? What happens
Mhm.
if a fire happens? How are you going to deal with that? So those are the things. The other things that you need to ask are, what are you planning to do to the property? Are you planning to turn the units? Are you planning to fix the roofs? What other capital is coming into the property and what problems could you have with that? And
Yeah.
how are you going to maintain the tenants? Is it a good neighborhood? You don't want to go into a place that has 50% tenants and every place around only has 80%. You're not going to make money on that deal. You want to
Mm-mm.
go into a place that has, if you're going into a place with 50 to 80% occupancy, you wanna make sure that everywhere around you is full because
Yes.
or at least at 95% so that you know that you can get up to the occupancy, and that will actually make the business plan work. So there's some important things.
Have you ever gone into a syndication with someone who's never done a syndication before?
I would like to say yes because I just became a GP. So, yes, I'm in a syndication right now with someone who's never done a syndication as the general partner before. That
Okay.
said, I'm in a group where 5 of the people in the group have done many syndications.
Okay.
So I'm in there learning. So no, I would not go into someone who is brand new that doesn't have someone on the team that is experienced. I don't care if it's one person on the team. That's
S
okay. So long
Somebody
as
needs
you
to
have
know
someone
more
who's
than you.
involved and understands.
Yes. Yes. 100%. So, I would say, no, never go into a syndication with someone who's never done a syndication before, who's doing it by themselves. If
Mhm.
they're doing a syndication for the first time and they can tell you, "This is my team, and this guy, this woman has done 12 syndications and raised how much money, and they've paid out most of the time." You wanted to know the team, bottom line. You want to know who's behind everything.
Syndication is a team sport. It's not a
It's not a one-person thing.
no.
And how are they gonna mitigate risks? What are you doing to protect my money? And I
And
would tell you, most syndicators, most people who raise money for deals never want to lose your money.
true.
Never. When I did it, it was like I was sick thinking about losing people's money. I lost money keeping people from losing money because it just, oh, it's icky. So if someone's your operator and they don't talk to you, you don't hear what's going on, that's a concern. You wanna be able to pick up the phone and call them if they're not calling you and hear what's going on. Hey, and understand what's going on. You should be able to get them to make you understand it. It's not above your level of understanding kinda talk at
And
all.
if they're not sending out at least quarterly reports, something's wrong. You need to be part of that. It has to be. Yeah, I'm okay with if it's not monthly. It should be monthly, especially initially. Once it's
Yeah.
smooth, it can't go less than quarterly. I think that every 3 months you have to know what's going on with your
It
syndication.
A lot of people are happy just because 'cause they're getting a distribution check in 3 months, every quarterly, but get the numbers if you can. Try to figure out what the heck, "Okay, how did I get this distribution check?"
Right.
You'll find out if, and sometimes you have to really look, the way you got your distribution check is they raised money from somebody else so that you could get paid. I have a lot of friends, actually, oh, me too, was involved in a deal that's how they were getting paid.
Can't do that.
It was bad, and the SEC found out about it. It's all bad, just badness.
That's a
So
called Ponzi scheme.
it's called a Ponzi scheme, and they're out there, but you can, and you get taken? Of course. Of course you can, because people that learn how to sell can sell well, but that's a managing the loss, managing the risks, and it can't keep you from taking that step out. So you did all these investing, and when did you stop working in medicine?
I was able to replace my salary 3 years after I started this journey. So and that was the goal, is that I had to replace my salary. So that was in December of 2021, 2020 December of, I think, 2020, I replaced it.
Okay,
Then I looked at my employment, and I had to work until May of 2022 to get 20 years in with the VA and be eligible for a pension.
okay,
So I haven't formally retired from the VA.
okay,
I will not formally retire until I'm 60. 'Cause
okay,
that's when I'm eligible for a pension that I worked for 20 years. So I stayed another year and a half basically, and then I retired after I met the 20-year so that I was eligible for retirement. If it had been another 2 years, I would have stayed another 2 years, but I did stay another year and a half. And just continued doing what I was doing after work.
How did you feel? What was the difference in feeling and going to work and knowing, "I don't have to, I'm doing this for
Well,
reasons
um,
you were doing it."
that was good. That was really good. It was at a time when, and this happened to my mom as well, with government administration. Government administration was becoming more suffocating, especially with COVID. They were doing a lot of things that I didn't agree with
At the VA.
at the VA. And one of the things that they were doing that I can share was they were isolating the patients in the nursing home. You could only go into the nursing home if you worked there and were wearing an N95 mask.
Okay.
So we're working with dementia patients who are looking at a mask and are scared enough,
Yeah.
and they didn't allow any visitors, which meant their families couldn't come visit them.
Right.
We did get a few people in when people were dying in the hospice unit, but very few. We're talking like maybe 3 covered over a course of 2 years, and they continued the isolation even beyond when things were scary. And so because of that, it became a little bit contentious because I didn't agree with how they were. I didn't think they were using evidence.
Okay.
And yes, they were doing what they knew at the time and what they were being told, but I didn't necessarily agree with the plan of action, especially with my patients, my
Yeah.
patient population.
Yeah.
And so it became very stressful for me during that time period because I wasn't agreeing, but I really couldn't speak out against it because of the situation.
Right. Right.
And because I can't put anything on social media. I still don't.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
use social media very rarely. And it's mostly to look at other people's posts
Yeah.
because that was my reputation and I couldn't change my reputation within the government. And I had been in the government for 20 years
Yeah.
and you can't have any politics or anything because of the Hatch Act. And so there were a lot of things that I had restricted myself. So reaching out when I thought things were problematic, I did talk to my leadership about it, but I couldn't go beyond.
Okay.
So that was
So
hard.
that kept you, that was the stress of being there,
Mhm.
and you had to, you in your mind, you had to be there so you could get your pension.
Well, and take care of my patients. My patients needed.
I got you. I understand. And you knew you had money coming from your salary was replaced. So you're here
Yes.
knowing you have your salary replaced. So I don't know. For me, knowing that I do not have to be here, I'm here because I want to. You're there because you wanted to take care of those patients. Even through the stress of what was happening in the government you wanted to be there to take care of those patients, not that you had to financially. And
I
that's
could,
where I was
yeah,
going with that. It's just like this a completely different feeling to know I don't have to. I'm doing this because I want to, and these people are important to me.
exactly.
Got
And they
it.
still are. The veteran population is amazing. I am so glad that I was able to do that for 20 years.
Nice.
It
Nice.
was perfect. I am so thankful for their service.
Your husband doesn't sound like he was too worried about this. He's like, "Okay, if you replace your salary, you can start investing, you can quit, but you gotta replace your salary." And I can imagine some spouses getting very nervous about the fact that you're gonna take this money out of these houses that we have, and you're gonna start investing it, and we could lose all our money. Did you guys have that conversation, or was he that easygoing about it?
We have since. He is nervous about it. It's not a comfort zone for him, but I took him on the cruise that we went on.
Okay.
That was his first introduction to let's change our lives. And he learned they called him a hostage for the first 2 days.
Yes.
And after the first 2 days, he was no longer a hostage and he was all in
He's in.
that this was the right thing to do and was in agreement that this was a great way to invest. And because of that, I didn't have too much pushback. The past couple years, because we've had some struggles with the economy and what's happened, he has questioned a few times. He's an engineer and he works for the local power company.
Okay.
And he does understand the numbers and would like to be more involved, but is really involved with work. So because of that, doesn't have the time to delve into the depth that I'm in with it. So he allows me to do what I do.
Mhm.
He married a doctor. He doesn't really question when I leave for a couple days and go to a conference. He just allows me to do it. And that actually is a good thing
Yeah.
but it means I don't question him either.
Yeah.
If he wants to get a new car, he gets one.
Yeah.
We just work it out in our budget and it just works out fine. So we can have a relationship that while we don't talk about everything, he needs to know more about what I'm doing just because my hands are in a lot of pots. But it works out okay because we don't really fight about that. Money is not
Okay.
something we fight over.
Okay. So you just started your own equity company, is that correct?
I did. I found out this summer, I'd been doing mentorships and how to invest as a GP, a general partner in syndications.
Okay.
So I've done about a year and a half, actually I think it's now 2 years of mentorship programs in which I learned how to underwrite and learned how to do all the little details, learning asset management and everything. And I joined a group in July that to join the group, everybody on the team has to raise capital.
Okay.
And because of that, I was talking to one of the mentors in the mentor group that I'm in, and he said, "You need a grown up email." That's what he told me. That you need a business email. You need a grown up email. So because of that, I already had a company that was the company that had owned properties in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So it was empty. There was nothing
Okay.
in it. I changed the name of it to Deerfield Equity. And I actually have the past 4 months has been my mission to learn how to bring the world into my deals.
Okay.
So I want to bring other people into my deals and raise equity and be that person for other people.
Okay. And is there a particular group of people that you're most interested in helping to invest, or are you like the world and will take all comers come?
I have a couple of groups actually. My ultimate group that I do want to get investing is teachers and nurses.
Okay.
I would have ultimately loved to have them. I know that I have to have more than that before I can start bringing them in because I need to show them a track record because they're going to be nervous and it's something they're not comfortable with. So I've been talking to some other people and I think I'm going to start with some doctor groups
Uh-huh.
as well as maybe some veterans that have equity. Um,
Okay.
and so that's where I'm going to start. Actually, my plan for the new year is to start going to some more medical conferences and bringing in my story
Okay.
and teaching them how they can make a difference so that they don't have to worry about retirement because just using their 401k is not going to get them to the
No.
retirement they want. It's just not
No.
going to happen.
No.
And so how can we get you to the retirement that you want? And I think I can help them do that.
The retiree that you want when you want it, not
Exactly.
necessarily 40 years from now. And we can pretty much be sure the government's gonna move that target. It's just gonna happen. The
It's
target
going to happen, but you should be able to do it on your own.
you should
You should be able to do it at your own time.
Yep.
And that's what I was able to do. And now, one thing that we didn't talk about earlier is I have 2 teenagers at home. And part of why I wanted to do this was so that I could spend time with them.
Mhm.
I was able to retire when my youngest was 15. My youngest is a soccer player and did travel soccer that summer. She had to get her driver's license. So I would drive to practice. She would drive home for practice. It was 45 minutes away. And I would stay there for an hour and a half because it was 45 minutes away. I wasn't going to go home in
Yep.
between. And so it was a 3 hour trip twice a week. And then we would have to travel about 3 hours to the soccer games each way on the weekends. And so we would share the driving and we got to spend that entire summer together and if I had been working full time, I would not have had that time with my child.
Yeah.
I also went to seeing my now senior freshman in college from seeing her about every 3 days to seeing her every day. I literally every 3 days because I'd come home late. He was already up in his room doing homework and didn't come back down unless I went upstairs into the room and interrupted him, and he might have been asleep. Who knows? But I would not see him. So it was about every 3 days I was saying hi. And so I got to see him every single day. And for the last 2 years of high school, and my youngest, my relationship with both of them has changed completely. And it's
Yeah.
been the most wonderful thing that
It's
I actually have created that relationship with my kids that I would not have had I stayed doing what I
it's
was doing. It was not the
and
right place for me at the time.
and it if you guys remember, that was the goal for her. Her why is to spend time with her kids, and it came in that year of mourning after her mom passed away, and realizing how short life really is. Like, it's what I'm imagining. It's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
no, this is not working for me right now. I'm never home. I don't know what my kids are doing. Oh my gosh." Yes.
Yeah, well, I was working every day during COVID. My kids
Mhm.
were home with my husband. That entire year, they were home studying or not studying really is what was happening on their
Yeah.
computers. And I wasn't involved in it at all because I was at work every single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a crazy they didn't see me at hardly at all that year. Even though everybody was home in
Yeah.
the world, I was not.
How do people get in touch with you? I'm sure there's some people that you're inspiring out here. Hopefully, some of these women docs out here who think they never could do it.
I'm gonna give actually my personal email and then my new Deerfield Equity email will be ready this weekend. We're putting it together. I still
Okay.
haven't established the website yet, but we're gonna be
Okay.
finishing it up today and this weekend. It's Julie at Deer, just DEER equity, deerfieldequity.com. So Julie
Okay.
at deerfieldequity.com, or you can find me at LinkedIn. I'm Julie Rehfeldt. And
This stuff will
also
be in the show notes, you guys. Just don't panic. It'll be in the show notes.
And
Okay.
also my main email, which I do respond to, is J Rehfeldt, which is JREHFELDT at me.com.
There you go.
So
Reach out. It's just not an impossible thing to do. Julie's done it. I've done it. There's lots of docs out here who have stepped away. And there's lots of docs who didn't step away because once they realized they didn't have to work, they actually liked working again. They liked taking care of patients because it's a completely different mindset. It really is. Julie, thank you so much. This was good, 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 good. I hope you guys got a lot out of this because there's some stories in there of how to get from where you are to where you want to be. And believe it or not, where you want to be changes on a regular basis. But you got to start somewhere. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.